joining us, and we'll get started. And if anybody has any questions that we can answer quickly, right now would be a good time before we do our opening prayers. Anybody have any thoughts that you want to discuss?
I have a question.
Okay.
Is there a practice that is centered around music generally? Is there like a bodhisattva of music?
Specifically, I can't say that there is, but there is a Buddha who is playing the veena, like a 4-string guitar type instrument or something like that, who is trying to help the human gods to recognize compassion, because they have a lack of compassion. So through the music, and you know how passionate music can be and so on. So that is something that that people would do. And I know that many times if you are playing music and you're really into it, you can get quite passionate about it and so on, and from your heart to their heart. So I don't know of a specific practice that does that, but I think generally, I think that you can develop something on your own with that. And we would love to hear you share that with us.
Oh,
We have a piano downstairs.
really?
I don't know if you've been downstairs, but it's in bad need of tune and a proper tuning.
I'll bring over my pitchforks.
All right, well, that's fine. We can bring an electronic keyboard if you would like to do that. That would be fine.
Lance, what did you say that instrument is called? The
Veena.
Tibetan?
A veena. V-I-N-A.
Have you ever played one of those? Do you know if anyone has one around the center? I would love to try one.
Yeah, the Tibetan people have them, you know, and they have a 3-string version of that, like a guitar. So, you know, it's you know, they're like folk instruments.
Cool.
So yeah, so it's interesting music, and you know, on 2 or 3 strings, they can do amazing things.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, good question. So now we need to get started. And where's my book? Okay. Well, Tom, why don't you start with the opening prayers? Would you do that, please?
Certainly. The opening prayers. We're using our 101 books. It's the altruistic motivation. So did you want me to do everything 3 times, or you just want 1 time?
Whatever you care to do.
Sure. Okay, so we'll do it twice in English and once in Tibetan. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I'll establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I'll establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dang la dang war je pe dra, no par je pe ge. Darpa dang tam che ken pe bardu chopar je pa tam che kiso je pe. Manam kadang yam pe sam chen tam che de wa dang den. Dung ya dang drill near du lana me pa yang dang par zo pe chang chu rimpo che the parja. the action bodhicitta prayer. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. De chedu sangmage ki bardu lugang yi sum gewala ko. Ma she bardu lugang yi sum gewala ko. Do they ring ne sing? Do they ring ne sung ne nima sangda samgi bardu lugang yi sum gewala ko. A long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the kind root lama and the lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities, the mandalas, the yadams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent orderless Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Daka, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root lama and the lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities and the mandalas, the yadams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Daka, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. 人前萨瓦当日帕切佩帕登拉玛当巴南拉卡尤瑟奇欧。Yedam kilkorgi lakshung namla kayok sochio. Sangje chomdende namla kayok sochio. Dampe chonamla kayok sochio. Pakpe jendung namla kayok sochio. Pawo kanjo choyok sungme sogyeshiki. Chendang denpa namla kayok sochio. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Changchu Mingpo Chikibar Sangje Namla Kayok Sochi Chodang Changchu Senpei Shoglayang Deshin Kayok Sochi Jitar Gongi De Sheki Changchu Dungyi Ke Padang Changchu Senpei La Pala Dedang Rimshin Ne Pata Desin Drola Pendang Du Changchu Senyi Ki Izing Duzin Duni La Pala Rempar Shindu La Par Gio. Short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangje Chodang Soki Chongnam La Changchu Bardu Dangi Kayok Sochi Dangi Jinso Jipe Sonam Ki Zhuo lao pen shi sam ge zhu par shou. The four immeasurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachments and aversions. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachments and aversions. Manam kadang yampe samchen tam che de wadang de we kurdang den por jurshi. Dunya dang dunya giu dang drawar jurshi. Dunya me pe de wadang mi drawar jurshi. Ring chakdang yidang draway tang yom la nepar jurshi. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, everybody. Does anybody have any questions about the opening prayers at all? Hadley, were you raising your hand or are you just fiddling with your camera?
I was trying to thank Tom for going slow enough on the Sanskrit that I could actually sing it along with everybody else and not get lost like I normally do. So thank you.
All right, very good.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is a yidam, a daka, and a dakini?
The yidams are the what we call meditational deities or the tutelary deities. They're like our personal deity that we are looking at our inner self through the lens of that particular deity. So it might be the Bodhisattva of compassion, it might be the Buddha of healing, it might be the Buddha of fearlessness, whatever. So that yidam is like your personal meditational deity for a period of time. It may be for your whole entire career, but it may be for some period of time, and then you find that you move to another yidam. And then after a period of time, you go to another yidam and so on. So it's the deity that kind of is helping you to experience the inner self, your innermost changes that you're going through.
Okay, thank you.
Dakas are, well, the dakinis and the dakas are, the daka is male and the dakini is female. And they're called like sky farers or sky goers. And they're like, the best analogy we can use, in terms of Western is they're like angels in a way. And they are within ourselves, and we can hear that inner voice within ourselves. And sometimes we hear that voice through other people. We hear, we might meet somebody and we just hear something that they say that becomes a mnemonic for me all of a sudden to remember something, or maybe it's something that I've repressed and brings it up, or something that it seems I'm hearing for the first time, but it just resonates with other things that I've learned and so on like that. So the dakas are those male deities, and they're usually considered to be like the Dharma palas. The Dharma palas are the Dharma protectors, and they would have a fierce aspect to them, that fiercely they are protecting the Dharma, they are protecting the teachings and so on. The dakinis there's a whole range of dakinis. So, but they are there to help us. Okay, we're back to recording. So, so it's like a palace, and it's the palace of that particular deity. And what we are doing ourselves is trying to put together, establish our own mandala as we become an enlightened being. That there's different levels and different beings who are helping us on those levels and so on. So we could create our own chart, so to speak, to be able to remind us, to remember, what it is that we have done, who has helped us, how we've received help, and so on like that. So the mandala is like that palace of your family or retinue that it becomes your Buddha field.
Thank you.
Okay, good questions. Okay, so what we've been talking about are these 9 yanas, these 9 vehicles to attain enlightenment or Buddha field or Buddhahood. Any one of these vehicles has the power, has the ability to be able to that we can move along gradually getting to Buddhahood. Some are a little bit more vague and some are very, very precise. And so the way we approach this has a lot to do with the 3 trainings that we talk about. And Mahamudra is the mind of enlightenment that all the enlightened ones have, this mind of enlightenment. And we are working to develop Mahamudra. So we develop it a little bit at a time. It's a progressive path. It's a gradual path for most of us. And that's one of the trainings. That's one of the ways in which we train is a gradual training, step by step. And each step could take us, a year, could take us 2 years, could take us a lifetime, could take us 2 or 3 lifetimes. It all depends on us, who we are, how it is that we are able to focus and so on like that. And the only thing that stands in our way of progressing all the way to Buddhahood is our own obstructions, the obstructions that we allow to interfere with our thought process, our mind, our big mind, heart thought process. So, so the gradual path is the one that is most frequently traveled by most of us. There is another path called the immediate path. And the immediate path is, like I was saying before about the Dakas and Dakinis, or other spiritual beings who may be speaking to us in a way that all of a sudden just triggers something in our heart mind or in our intellectual mind. And it triggers this like a mnemonic. You see something and it reminds you of something. You hear a piece of music and it reminds you of something. You meet somebody and it reminds you of something. So this immediate is really, there's seeds that come ripen, seeds that have been planted when all the conditions are right, that all of a sudden that seed begins to sprout and changes begin to come and so on. So that immediate training is the work of karmic connection. So many of us who discover the Dharma and discover Dharma centers and everything, some of us take to it like immediately. Wow, this really resonates with me. Wow, I just seem to recall this very clearly, and everything that I'm learning, it just means so much to me. Some people everything is very obtuse to them, and they're struggling to get it, but they're working at it, working at it. So those that it comes easy to, we could say that they have an immediate connection, and they just hear something or see something, and all of a sudden it just registers with them. Those who are having difficult time, they're planting those seeds so that maybe next year or maybe next month or maybe next lifetime, those seeds then will be germinated when those conditions are right for them. So it is a continuum. It is something that is moving along in a gradual path, but there is this aspect of immediacy as a result of our karmic connections that we're developing through this. The third thing is called non-sequential. This non-sequential, we've been talking about this a little bit time about ourselves through, among ourselves and so on. And I'm going to tell you what it really means to me. And through your investigations, you may find out other things, and we can talk about that. But the non-sequential means that there's not a sequence to it. Non-sequential means no sequence. It's more holistic. It's more direct. And like, it's like getting the whole thing all at one time. So there's an example that I've used many times, that we experience enlightenment. We experience Buddhahood from the top down or from the bottom up. From the top down, when we are ordinary human beings, like we are now, and we die, our physical body goes away, our intellectual body goes away, and all that's left is our spiritual body. And that spiritual body, all of a sudden, all that's there is spirit. And it is put into that intermediate realm of reality, what we call reality. So this is like top down. All of a sudden, we're just there. If we're prepared for it, then we know what to look for, we know what to expect, and we know how to guide the spiritual body through that bardo of reality, that intermediate state of reality. For us to be able to get that guidance, we approach it from the bottom up. And this is what we're doing now. We're learning all these different things. We're learning all these academics. And at the same time, we're learning all these techniques for meditation, for practice. So this is all training from the bottom up, so that finally, when we do come to the day that we release our body, we release that spirituality because our body dies, then we have the training to be able to guide ourselves through that bardo of reality. We're in that bardo of reality now, but we only see part of it. We're only seeing this waking part, this part of being a human being. We don't see the other part of our Buddha nature, of our true nature. So we're trying to learn what that is. We're trying to introduce that to ourselves and so on through our teachings, through our contemplations, through our practices and so on like that, our personal experiences of that. So there's top down, there's bottom up. And what this is helping us to recognize is this holon, this non-sequential, because when you have that experience, there's no time, there's no location, there's no place. It's all omnipresent. So we learn through that. And if we are fortunate enough to be able to have good meditation practices, that we may be able to, with our limited teachings, that we may become, but we do have good concentration powers, we may be able to have glimpses of that holistic nature. And just that glimpse, just that finger snap can all of a sudden, you're there. And just as quickly as you're there, it goes away. But then you work at it and you increase those experiences so that those glimpses become more and more frequent, and they become deeper, they become higher, they become more profound, and so on. And so through that process, we become more in tune with that holistic approach to things. So I hope that explains something to you. So those are the three trainings: the gradualist training, the immediate training, and the non-sequential training, this direct holistic training. So that's kind of like an overview of what it is that we're trying to do. And we can use all three of those methods. All three of those types are available for us. What we are, well, let me put it this way. When we were talking about in the very beginning, and just let me refresh our memories, that we talked about there is the path of renunciation. Remember, there was 4 paths of the vehicle path, of this jhana path. There's the path of renunciation, there's the path of purification, there's the path of transformation, and there's the path of self-liberation. So this is a sequential path. However, we can have an immediate connection, and we can have a non-sequential connection with this. But for most of us, it's a gradual path. So focusing on the gradual path, that there are stages of meditation concentration, meditative concentration. So this is first taught to us when we are in the path of renunciation. When we are learning how to properly meditate and so on, and developing our skillful means to become an arhat. If you remember, we talked about this early on. Our arhat was the hearer and the solitary realizer, the pratyeka Buddha, the Shravaka and the pratyeka Buddha, who are on the path. They're selfishly on the path for their own enlightenment, but we all need to do that in the beginning for ourselves. We need to start that way. We just can't immediately start as a bodhisattva unless there's an immediate connection. We can pick up where we left off, so to speak. But for most of us, we begin that way. And so there are these stages of meditative concentration that begin in the path of renunciation. So, and they carry through these aspects of this stages, carries through in all the subsequent stages or pathways that we go through. So it's something that we learn in the beginning, but it takes us all the way through. So the first one is called the 4 absorptions. The 4 absorptions. So these 4 absorptions is the sphere of desirelessness. If you remember, we were talking, I think last week, I introduced this idea that there are, that we are form bodies, we have this form, and we have desire. And that's the kama loka, or the kama dhatu. That's our body as it is right now. But as we develop in the path, the desire begins to go away. We still have form, but the desire goes away. The desire is like we transcend desire. So in that realm, in that 4 absorptions, there are 4 characteristics of that. So the first stage is called, we relinquish desire and unwholesome factors through concentration and conceptualization and reasoned discursive thought, reasoned thought. So it's like logically looking at things. And there's a joyful interest and there's a state of well-being that is associated with this. So maybe, to some degree, maybe we're touching on that now. We're getting introduced to that. Maybe we've had some experience with that. And we say, you know what, I think I got this desired thing under control, but it can still rear its ugly head and bite me. But at the same time, I'm beginning to understand it. And there's a joy with that. There's a sense of well-being to that. But it's not a selfish thing. It's not an arrogant thing. The second stage of absorption is coming to rest of the conceptualization and the discursive thought. So this logic, this investigation, this contemplation begins to settle down. We don't need to do that so much. We've exhausted so many of those possibilities, and that we've learned the technique of being able to do that, so we can quickly go right through that as soon as we're introduced to a new thing that has popped up. We can use that logic right away to transcend whatever attachment or aversion we might have about that thing. So we're absorbed in being able to, in that transcendence. So here is an attainment of an inner calm. Here is a one-pointed mindfulness, a one-pointed concentration in meditation. And the joyful interest and the well-being continues. So the major thing here is that we're developing one-pointed concentration or one-pointed mindfulness. And you've heard me say that many, many, many times over the years that we've been talking about this. And you hear the lamas talk about it all the time, that's what we're trying to do. We're focusing our body. We're trying to focus our intellect into one-pointed mindfulness, being mindful. And then what happens, it's like a key fitting into a lock. And then, bam, the heart center opens up. The heart mind opens up. Our spiritual body opens up. If we try to open this up by just, concentrating on this, doing this and doing this practice and doing that practice and so on, it doesn't happen directly like that. It happens when the body is rested. It happens when the intellect is rested. That's when the heart mind opens up. So we talk about being in the quietude. Gary used that term a couple of months ago. We were talking about things, and he was talking about an experience he had in the quietude. And that's perfectly describes this, that we're in this quietude. So that's the second stage. The third stage of the absorptions is that we remain alert and aware, and there's a state of well-being, but this joy goes away. This joy now becomes transmutable. It's not localized. It's not localized to me. It's not localized to someone else. It's the everything. Joy, the word joy isn't necessary anymore. There's just there's a higher level of awareness. So the state of well-being, this alertness, and this how's it say it? And this awareness. So this is opening up the door. This is getting a strong glimpse now of being awakened. And that's the definition of a Buddha, is the awakened one. So we're getting closer and closer. It doesn't happen. It can happen like that, but it's happening slowly, slowly, slowly. When it happens like that, it's because a lot of work has been done below the surface or in the background or before we got to where we are. And then all of a sudden there becomes this moment of direct holistic, recognition that seems as though, wow, all of a sudden this happened magically. No, but there was a whole lot of other work that wasn't recognized, that we wouldn't recognize seeing it with somebody else. That individual, they might know what was happening because they understand, the dynamic of how all this builds up and so on. And this is what we're introducing to you right now in a very general way. So now the fourth absorption, the fourth stage of the absorption is that the state of well-being now fades away. The joy has gone away. The well-being has gone away. And what is left is equanimity and wakefulness. Equanimity and wakefulness, that we are aware of what's going on around us. We're becoming more and more aware, cognizant of what's going on. We have more of a critical thinking, critical awareness of what's happening around us. And there is this equanimity that it is all the same, that all the dualistic nature and so on has all settled into just this sense of oneness, of equality, of sameness. Does somebody have a question or wanted to say something? Okay, I heard somebody speak up. So these are the 4 stages of the lower meditative concentration. So what we're working at now, we certainly have the ability to build up to these 4 absorptions. We can do that in this lifetime quite easily if we're committed to this process of learning, of contemplating, of practicing, and allowing ourselves the ability to be able to have that experience. There's an analogy here. We talk about a seed. So if our seed is our karmic connection with our true nature, and we take that seed and we're able to plant that seed in a nutritious environment, okay, and it's getting the right nutrients, it's getting the right causes and conditions to be able to grow. And then it gets the right heat, it gets the right sunlight, and then it gets the right water. It's got the conditions of nutrients, it's got the conditions of moisture, water, it's got the conditions of warmth for that seed to germinate and to pop open. And then the seedling, the stem begins to come up and so on. So now the stem needs to have room. It needs to have the potential for growth. If that seed, if that stem is capped, it's not going to grow and it's going to wither very quickly, just as if the water stopped, just as if the nutrients stopped, or just as if the heat stopped. It needs to have room to grow. So my point here is to remind us that if we've got all these things, the commitment that we have is the commitment that we are giving ourselves to allow ourselves to grow, to give ourselves the space. So what does that mean? Does that mean that, we've got a place that we can go to, that we have time in which we can spend in that place? Do we have a program, a system that we are following that will lead us, that is creating those conditions and causes for us to be able to let our seed grow and begin to go? So we need to be able to have that space in which to be able to do that. It's an integral part of this system. Whether we do it this week, whether we do it next week, whether we do it next year, whether we do it next lifetime, that's immaterial. We'd all like to do it right away. What's the secret? What's the shortcut? How can I do this really quick? Everybody wants to do that. But when we see that we're on this continuum And we've been on this continuum for many, many, many lifetimes just to get to where we are right now. And that this continuum continues after we give up this body that we have. And it's just like going to our closet in the morning and changing clothes, taking off our old clothes and putting on new clothes. And we go out, we do the day. So we have another body that we go into. And this is figuratively. It's not, right now, it's Lance and it's Tom and it's Gary and it's Brendan and so on like that. They'll never come again. It's only one time that we have this body. But all that we are putting together, all that karma and so on like that, will manifest again as some other being. Maybe a man, maybe a woman, maybe here in the United States, maybe in some other nation, maybe on this planet, maybe on another planet. There's a lot of things that can happen. So we're getting introduced to this idea that we're on this continuum, and the continuum we experience, but we intellectually can't really hold on to it. This is the whole thing about the non-conceptual true nature of that spirituality that we all have within ourselves, and to be comfortable with that and to allow that to grow is what we're trying to do. So these 4 absorptions then, they give way to the next part. The next part are called the 4 formlessnesses. The 4 formlessnesses. So remember, we were talking about that we had our desire body and we had our form body. Then we have our desireless body and we have our form body. That's what we just came from with those 4 absorptions. Then we move into the 4 formlessnesses and the 4 desirelessnesses. So this is moving up. And so now we're getting into the realms or the paths of transformation. So we've gone through the path of renunciation into the path of purification. That was the one-pointed mindfulness part. And now we're going into the path of transformation, where we become truly a spiritual being, where if somebody asks you who you are, and, are you an American? Are you a man? Are you a woman? Are you white? Are you black? Are you this? Are you that? The first thing you say is, I'm a spiritual being. That's what you recognize yourself as. You identify yourself as that. And even that, at some point we give that up. So this path of transformation now are these 4 formlessnesses, and they get much simpler. It gets much simpler now. So the first is what we would say. So we're talking about the 8 stages of meditative concentration. So the first 4 were absorptions. The second 4 are the formlessnesses. So we start off with the 5th stage here. The 5th stage of the meditative concentration is the limitlessness of space. The limitlessness of space. To be able to experience that, you got to be in a really stable place in your meditative practice to be able to really experience that limitlessness of space. But having an awareness that it's there, or that it's something that we're working toward, begs the question for us and leads us in that direction. It gives us permission to move from one place to another. The next one is the sixth stage. And the sixth stage is the limitlessness of consciousness. Limitless of consciousness. So here's space. We could define that. But then there's consciousness. So is space within consciousness? And there's a lot of discussion about that. There's a lot of books that have been written about that. There's a lot of meditation about that. To recognize not just space, or to experience not just space, but to experience consciousness. And the limitless quality of that consciousness. So if we can think of the universe as the universe of space, and within this space are all these objects, these celestial bodies that are in this space. But then there is a consciousness that all of that is subsumed within. That's a bit of a mind blower.
Lance,
Yes.
it's been too long since I've read, but didn't Schrodinger talk about something similar to that?
I have no idea. I never read them. I don't know anything about them.
Okay.
But I wouldn't doubt that many people have read this. I mean, this is not unique to Buddhism. You know, in other religious philosophy, it's expressed, and in Western philosophy, it's expressed. So yes, it's quite possible. I don't know the names of the people, but this has been expressed by many people, many different ways.
It sort of resonates with the Jaina ahimsa.
I don't know what that is.
It's like the world spirit.
Okay.
I have a question. You talked about number 4, this equanimity and wakefulness.
Yes.
Dual nature is oneness. I experience my life kind of like a dream almost, where when I see other people, I look at their soul and I see my soul looking back at me and their soul looking back at me. So it's like there's one soul. Is that the oneness that you're talking about?
It could be. It's a simile, you know, because it's not. We're you know, when we try and express it in those kind of terms, we're trying to make it finite, and
Okay.
it's not finite.
No, when I see other people, I feel like they're a part of me and I'm part of
I
them.
understand the point,
But I don't know
but
what that
it's a
is.
concept, isn't it?
It is a concept, yes.
Okay, and what we're trying to get to is non-conceptual.
Okay.
Non-conceptual experience. So every
Okay.
time we have that kind of a thought, it's like this or it's like that, a simile, one type of, that's conceptual. And it pulls us out of the non-conceptual.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Lance, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Going way back, you talked about the 4 absorptions
Yes.
and relinquished desire through logically looking at things.
Yes.
Is that similar to the Buddha's first noble truth that all life is suffering?
Oh,
For example,
absolutely.
professional sports was a big deal for me throughout my childhood, and now I realize it's vacant, that it gives nothing. It's a distraction that people use. And is that the type of realization that would start you on the path, for example, of what you're talking about?
Well, you begin to recognize that there are levels, you know, and we grow out of levels for different reasons, you know, and those levels satisfy certain things at certain points, and but it doesn't necessarily annihilate those levels, but it puts them into a different perspective.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll move on then. So the fifth stage was the limitless of space. The sixth stage was the limitless of consciousness. Now we come to the seventh stage. The seventh stage is nothing whatever.
That's it. It's
End,
just
end of story. Sorry, I interrupted you, Anna.
oh, I was asking if that was it. It was just nothing.
Nothing whatever.
Okay.
So that's a mind blower.
Well, I think a thing is a concept.
What's that?
I think, a thing becomes a concept, or it's a thing, it's a concept that becomes thing. And
Nothing
all
is
these
a concept. One
right,
is a
but
concept.
all those pieces become what creates our story, our movie. And high, sort of distracts us away from seeing life as it really is. But then I think we get the glimpses, because we get to fine tune our focus in order to see instances of life as it really is. And then we sort of move to the next step and understand the true nature of ourself. But but I think I like where you're going with the levels of absorption and moving on. It's making a lot of sense to me.
Very good. Thank you. So nothing whatever. So all concepts, letting all concepts go. And then we come to the eighth stage. And the eighth stage is beyond awareness and non-awareness. So if we haven't disappeared by now in this process, here is where we truly would disappear. And this is where, in your meditation, you may be hours, days, weeks in complete absorption or formlessness of that Lance is gone, Anna is gone, Brendan is gone, Michael is gone. There's no thought of any of that. It is beyond that. The senses it's like going to sleep, in that the senses are not operational. The senses as we know them. And it just becomes that pure experience of, and to get there, we will have gone through the yidams. We have gone through the Buddha nature. We will have looked at all these different possibilities as exemplars of how we get to stabilize ourselves in this nothing whatever of this beyond awareness and beyond non-awareness. But that gets released too. So when we get to the yana, the ninth yana, the yana of the Ati Yoga, that's the experience. That's, this is a way of talking about it. there's other traditions, like I've been studying the Tao Te Ching a lot lately. And the Tao Te Ching that's what it's talking about all the time. And it's really keeping it very simple. It keeps it very simple. Talks about space. It talks about the 10,000 things. It talks about nature. And it puts it into a very stark, simple framework. So it's very easy to carry around. It's very light, very spacious. The Buddhism does that too, but we have to move through and we have to let go of all the Buddhist symbolism that we've been building up. But the Buddhist symbolism gives us the logical understanding and the experience of one-pointed mindfulness. So the example I've used now a number of times in talking about this is that in Buddhism, we talk about, overcoming our ego. So what we're doing is we're creating an ego that is a Buddha. But then at some point we let that go. Back in the day, when I was first starting to meditate and so on back in 1970 and so on like that, there were lots of books about all this stuff. And there was this book about you have to kill the Buddha. And for years, I carried that around with me, or just that idea. What do you mean I got to kill the Buddha? And finally one day it dawned on me what that meant. I'm the Buddha. I'm creating that for myself, but it becomes an ego attraction to purify myself. But at some point, it becomes like a lead weight. So my intention is not to discourage anybody at this point. My intention here is to blow your mind. I want you to understand. I want you to look at this as a great opportunity that few people get to experience. Not that you should be special or anything like that, but to be a complete human being. And that's what the Taoism is. The Taoism is like the essential humanistic tradition. Because it comes right back down to it that we're still breathing. We're still human beings. So this formlessness, these four formlessnesses then become the stages of higher meditative concentration. Any comments or questions?
Lance, could you rattle off the 8 real quick? Just say the words.
Okay. Before absorption start, first stage. Relinquishing desire and unwholesome factors through concentration and conceptualization. And reasoned discursive thought. Giving that up. There is joyful interest and state of well-being. The second stage is coming to rest of conceptualization and discursive thought. Attainment of inner calm, one-pointedness of concentration and meditation, joyful interest and well-being continue. So logic is gone. The third stage is joy disappears and is replaced by equanimity, alertness, and awareness. Well-being continues. The fourth stage is the state of well-being fades. Equanimity and wakefulness are only present. The fifth stage is the limitlessness of space. The sixth stage is the limitlessness of consciousness. The seventh stage is nothing whatever. And the eighth stage is beyond awareness and non-awareness.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Anybody need a break? You want to stand up and stretch, get a drink of water or whatever? Okay. All right. So last week we talked about the path of purification. We talked about the Kriya Yoga or the Kriya Tantra and the Charya Tantra. So we were talking about the 5 poisons. We're talking about logic. We're talking about morals. We're talking about the paramitas. We're talking about all this stuff to be able to analyze who we are, what it is that we're doing, and so on like that. And we're doing this through the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. And for the most part, we're doing this peacefully with the peaceful deities. The peaceful deities, that we are the conduct of these deities. We may be introduced, depending on the program that we're part of, we may be introduced to some of the more intense, fierce deities, the wrathful deities. And right now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the wrathful deities, they're shown to be these ferocious beings who are standing and have flames all around them and so on. And their wrathfulness is their fierceness of compassion. They're not angry. They're not hateful. But what they are doing is they have such fierce compassion to subdue that hatefulness, to subdue that ignorance, to subdue that jealousy, those emotions that are overwhelming us. This compassion from these deities is greater than that. And they're doing it out of their love. They're doing it out of their compassion. So they're not wrathful in the sense that they're angry. Michael, did you want to say something?
No, thank you.
Okay. So now we're getting into this path of transformation where things are really turning around, and we're getting into what we call the highest yoga tantra. Now, there's a whole lot of stuff that's written about this, and there's a whole lot of ceremony about stuff like this. So this is meant to be an introduction for you so that you can see the direction in which we are moving. But now we've been able to overcome, or we've learned about our poisons. We've learned about our emotions. We've learned about how it is that we can overcome those emotions. And we've learned about those wisdoms, how we become masters of those wisdoms. And now we're moving to a point of transformation where we are going beyond, or we are bringing together, is a better way of expressing it. We're bringing together our dualistic nature. We're bringing together the ideas of positive and negative, of bad and good, of poison and antidote, of wisdom and skillful means. We're seeing all this come together in one-pointed mindfulness. We're seeing this all together. Everything comes onto the path. We have the ground where we stand right now. We have the path that we're treading to get to our goal, which is Buddhahood or liberation or enlightenment, whichever you wish to call it, all the same thing. So this pathway, for this pathway to be true, it's got to have all this stuff on it. Nothing is negated. Everything is valid. All experience is valid. But we have to be able to control our mind's involvement with all of this. The mind can run away with all this and go off in all these different tangents, and we create all these different emotions for ourselves and so on, not the least of which is our arrogance, thinking, I got this. So this yoga tantra, this yoga, the word yoga is a Sanskrit word that means union. So the union of all these disparate things, all these different issues, all coming onto the path to liberation, the path to Buddhahood, the path to enlightenment, all this coming together. On the paths that we've tread up to this point, or from the Kriya Yoga and the Charya Yoga, we're learning about these different Buddha families. And when Michael had up his screensaver there, and he had the mandala of the 5 Buddha families as one example, each one of those, you see that there is a color that identifies that. And there is a light that is associated with those 5 Buddha families. And those 5 Buddha families have many, 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 many elements about that, different bodhisattvas and different dakinis and dakas and protectors and so on like that. And they all are exuding those different lights. And we begin to see those lights, not with our eyes, but with our heart mind. We begin to experience that with our heart mind. Those different lights, the red light, the blue light, the green light, the yellow light, the white light. And we begin to experience things with that light and so on. And it's profoundly enlightening. But then when we get to the Yoga Tantra that we're talking about now, we get to the clear light. The clear light. All this colored light now, this light begins to fade into just complete clarity. And there may be tints of this light, we can bring the wisdom and the skillful means that comes from the Kriya Yoga and the Charya Yoga, we can bring it to bear in the Yoga Tantra. But what happens? So we bring it in, and then it clears up. We become clear. We talk about clarity. So just because we've moved from one tantra to another, from one of these yanas, one of these vehicles, doesn't mean that we're not moving, we're bringing them up. Remember, it's a hold-on. These things are all together. We're looking at them in a sequential pattern so we can intellectually understand them. But in reality, they're all together. So we never lose them. We don't annihilate them. They don't change. So this clear light comes. The Mahamudra, I said before, Mahamudra is the mind of enlightenment, the mind of all the enlightened ones. All the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have bodhicitta, and bodhicitta is the fundamental component of Mahamudra, this mind. And we can say that in this mind, there is clarity. There is impermanence. And there is unimpededness. So if you think for a moment that you have experienced Mahamudra, or that you're stable in Mahamudra, then ask yourself, where is my clarity? Where is my impermanence? Where is my unimpededness? And as long as you're asking yourself those questions, you ain't there. Because when you get to those points, all those questions are gone. They're all satisfied. They're all answered. They're all part of who we are. That's what it is to be awakened. So it's healthy to be on the path. It's healthy to be asking these questions. It's healthy to be doing this, but we spend lifetimes doing this. And have gratitude that we're able to do it, that you have teachings to do it, that you have guides to help you with this, and that you have the wherewithal yourself to be able to bring this to fruition, to be able to tread the path to get to the goal, even if it's just a glimpse after glimpse after glimpse. So through this Yoga Tantra now, we are applying a lot of logic. We're going through investigation. We're looking at these things, we're analyzing these things, but we're doing it with a clarity of understanding, the dynamics of how things operate within our mind. We're all talking about human beings here. We're not talking about something out of space. We're talking about being a human being and the limits of being a human being. But being able to enjoy everything that we can as a human being, because it is a great gift to be a human being. When we were talking about the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma, the first one is that we have a precious human body. So, included in this Yoga Tantra now, we get into philosophy. Now, in the philosophy, I'm not a very good philosopher. I'm not the one to really talk about these things very much. I can talk about them a little generally as best I can. I'm not a scholar. I'm more of a yogi. I'm happy to be a yogi. I want to be a yogi. The scholars, they will say, what is the quintessential question? How many Buddhas can be on the head of a pin? And they'll argue about this, for books are written about this kind of stuff, and they enjoy that, and fine, I'm not there, so I'm not trying to dampen your spirit if that's the way you want to go. But nevertheless, so in this Yoga Tantra now comes this school of mind-only school. You'll if you start reading about any of this stuff, very quickly you're going to be introduced to what's called Citta Matra. Citta Matra. Citta means the mind, the heart mind. Citta, and Matra means one, only one mind. And what this is saying, what the people who are adherents of this philosophy say, there's only mind. It's all merely mind. And that all this other stuff is just all fabrication of the mind. And that the more that you involve yourself with that, it becomes this never-ending circle of mind only. So that's okay, people like that, I say, okay, let's get over that. So in Yoga Tantra, moving through that mind only and saying, okay, I want to go to the inner yoga. I want to go into the inner union of dualistic thought, where all that Siddhamatra stuff is operating. And I want to combine that all with wisdom and compassion, method and wisdom, all coming together. And this becomes the realm, or this is where we begin to see these fierce deities, these yidam fierce deities. There's yidams that can be peaceful deities. These are yidams of fierce, wrathful deities who have this great passion, or excuse me, wrong word, this great compassion to be able to overcome what hasn't been able to be satisfied at this time. If you can satisfy these things with the peaceful deities, do it and be happy. There's no need to have to go to this level of practice, investigation, and so on. You can achieve enlightenment at the peaceful level and be very happy. But for those of us who have nothing better to do and enjoy this kind of investigation and experience, then here it is. We can do that. So here in the Yoga Tantra, it emphasizes meditation. You got to be a strong, powerful, stable meditator to get into this. You know, we got to be ready for this. And you need a teacher to guide you with this, because it's very easy to kind of get lost in the minutia of visualization and so on like that. So I'm introducing it to you with looking at it with some safeguards and saying, you know, it's something that you've got to do as part of a program. You got to do it as part of it with a teacher and so on. You've got to have karmic seeds for this. You know, a beginner wouldn't go into this. But as beginners, to know that it's there, and when somebody is trying to guide us there or trying to influence to go there or something like that, we say, you know what, I'd love to do that, and maybe I'll do it next lifetime. Or maybe I'll do it in a few years, or whatever way you can think about it. But to know it's okay not to be ready for something. It's wise to be that, to know that I'm not prepared for that. But it's wise to know that it's there, because you may get a book and you're opening up the book and you start reading about it. It looks interesting. You see some pictures and everything. It's good to have a general idea of what it is. So Yoga Tantra emphasizes meditation, but it's very profound meditation. Okay, very good, Michael. All right, so these peaceful deities, when they are not as passionate or not as powerful to overcome whatever emotions are arising and so on, their emanations as these fierce deities are available, are there. But if it can be handled at the peaceful level, that's great. It doesn't have to go to this level. So the deity yoga is the expanse of indestructible reality, the expanse of indestructible reality. So that's a big statement. And we talk about this in Buddhism, 501 class. So experiences, there's 5 awakenings, there's 4 yogas and 4 seals and non-symbolic contemplation. It concerns the real nature of the mind. And external observations are not rejected. So what all this is saying, that there is this system that is there for us to be able to get into. If you want to go into, what would be, this master's degree or maybe even a doctorate degree level, talking about it in the Western sense of schools, to get into these things. And everything is on the table. Nothing is off the table. Everything is valid to be able to talk about. So all this is part of this wisdom realm of the mind, of what it is that we have, the gifts that we have within ourselves, these blessings that we have. So it's beyond elaborations and so on. And so, as I said, it's a meditative process. So this is all Yoga Tantra, much, much more. Does anybody have any questions or comments right now? What do you think of this?
Elaine, Lance,
Yes, sir.
have you done specifically jhana meditation?
Wisdom meditation?
Jhana, I guess you might call it wisdom meditation, jhana meditation.
Well,
Inhabiting, moving through those phases intentionally, and
yes.
Yeah.
Lance, you said that you were trying to blow our minds, which I think is awesome. And I remember many, many weeks ago, you said that there's wisdom that our American culture had from the 1960s that we've lost, and that perhaps we make fun of hippies and that sort of thing. But this reminds me of that a bit, that there's tremendous wisdom. I agree. I was born in 72. I wasn't around in the 60s, but I think there's probably a lot that we've lost and that you're trying to bring back to us. I just was wondering your thoughts on that.
There's a book called The White Hole in Time, written by Peter Russell. Peter Russell's my age. And he traveled about, and I fracture his name, the Maharishi, who was teaching transcendental meditation back in the 60s. And it's the famed yogi who the Beatles went to, and the Rolling Stones and all that then in India, and traveled with him and everything. And so he was teaching transcendental meditation, and Peter Russell was traveling with him. And he wrote the book called TM, which was the manual, for transcendental meditation. So this was back in, middle 60s, late 60s, something like that. And in this, and then later on, a few years later, I got the book here. I should look at the copyright date. But at some point, upon further reflection and so on, Peter Russell wrote The White Hole of Time. And what he explains in the beginning part is that Western people look at history in terms of wars, looks at history in terms of calamities, looks in terms of terrible things that happen, and that's how we measure time and so on. But he made the observation, and he goes back, many centuries and so on, and points out that with those terrible things that happen, there is also a period, there is also something that happens very positive. So there is a nadir of consciousness, but then there is this zenith of consciousness, where is this burst of enlightenment. And then he then proceeded to look at many of those examples that he was pointing out in terms of what the enlightenment was. And he explained these as white holes in time. And that there are these, what we say, paradigm shifts, where consciousness shifts. So the point to this is, we went through that from the bottom up. We grew up with that. We had to live through those experiences and everything to be able to grasp whatever benefit we can hold on to, we can have within ourselves and so on. But then there's this white hole in time where children who are born after that now are born with that epiphany, are born with that paradigm shift as in their psyche, in their being. They're born with it already. We had to work at it. You've got it. And of course, and the same thing's true with us and my parents, my generation. My parents grew up in the Depression. My parents went through World War II and so on like that. I was born right after World War II. I wasn't born in the Depression and everything. And my generation had a different way of looking at the world that my parents did. And there was a bit of a chasm there between us, but we worked to, bring it together in ways that we could. And the same thing with our children, your age, to bring that together and to be able to recognize that. So there is this white hole in time that we go through and these paradigm shifts. And here's the most interesting part about this is that this happens every 90 to 110 years. There is this shift in consciousness every 90 to 100 years. And so predictably, it's going to happen in 2050, 2060, somewhere in that time period that you guys are going to have to deal with. We're going to be gone. I'm going to be gone. And what we're doing now, this is why guys like me are driven to do what I'm doing, is to introduce this to you so that you can take responsibility for what happens in your life and for your children and your children's children and so on like that. We can look at it, it doesn't matter. We can look at it from a nihilistic point of view. It doesn't matter. But we're bodhisattvas. We look at it that it does matter.
Thank you.
What do you think of that?
Lance, I wonder, I have done transcendental meditation. I didn't do the whole initiation. I did what I did with a lot of stuff, spirituality in my early 20s. I just downloaded everything off the internet and I sort of did it on my own. But I wonder, how far does transcendental meditation go, do you think, if we're talking about these levels of meditation?
It goes the whole way.
With that?
It goes the whole way. You're the only one that stops it. You're already enlightened. We all are, but we get bound up by our emotions. We get interrupted and we start following those emotions like a ring through our nose, pulling us this way, that way, and so on like that.
We get buried in our stories.
We get buried in our stories, exactly, in our ego. Yep. So Ken Wilber, who is the preeminent philosopher of our time, he says, look, we're all enlightened, but living an enlightened life is what's difficult. So these traditions, these things that we're talking about, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or Judaism, Hindu, Taoism, or whatever, are systems in which we can begin to discipline ourselves and break that ring that's through our nose so that we stop being enslaved to our emotions and we start developing critical thinking and take responsibility for being a human being and celebrate being a human being. Anybody else got a comment? Curtis, what do you think about this? You've studied a lot of philosophy and different systems. What do you think about this? You're muted, Curtis.
Sorry. The Tibetan philosophical framework is complex, and Lance is introducing us to one of the categories. The other being the two he mentioned, the Charya and the Kriya. The value of grasping something about the philosophy is that the terminology that floats around Tibetan Buddhism starts to be part of a system rather than just terms here, there, and everywhere. So this is why it's important to get some understanding of it. Don't forget, there's always Wikipedia. There's quite a bit of knowledge there. A lot of this is very basic philosophical introduction. So it's important to have some basic philosophical ideas or understanding of the basic philosophical structure so that it's a little more manageable.
We don't know what we don't know. So here we're introducing some of which we didn't know before. Anybody else got a comment, question?
Yeah, I'd like to say one more thing, say something for philosophers. Tibetan Buddhists do a lot of study, and there's a place for study, for reading books, for getting understanding. It's not the end, and it can get in the way, but ultimately it's a good thing when it's done right, and that's why an organized understanding of the philosophy of Tibetan Buddhism has value. That's why we have the teaching. Lance is giving us trying to give us an understanding of Tibetan Buddhism's philosophy. Because without the structure, you can't really understand how it fits together. And it's important to know that.
Yes, thank you.
I wonder, just for my conceptualization of this, these things, the paths and transformation paths, these are things that we are learning intellectually to such a degree that we internalize them unconsciously. And then when we are in a state of bodhicitta mind, they will arise from within us spontaneously. Is that an okay conceptualization of something that I'm not really supposed to conceive of too hard?
Yeah, more or less. First we have to understand the process of what the change is, but then the inner transformation begins to happen. So that outer transformation is, you know, the way we're thinking and so on like that. But that's a process. We have to remind ourselves. But then when we start doing it subconsciously, it just becomes part of who we are. That's the inner transformation. And that's exactly what we're trying to work for. So yes.
Just so, yeah, like, because our personalities are all of our unconscious things we've experienced in our life. And when we're acting freely,
yeah, but we can change
as ourselves.
But we have to have critical thinking for that and recognize that that may be false, or elements of that may be false. Elements may be true, but we need to be able to purify that. That's what the Kriya Yoga and the Charya Yoga is, that purification of analyzing all that and changing your personality.
Understanding that that's mutable.
That's mutable. Yes. And
Yeah,
then you become a nicer person to yourself and to others. You know, you may, you know, you have patience where you didn't have patience before. You know, many things begin to change without you having to think about it. You know, it just happens. It happens sort of, I don't want to say automatically, but it's something like that. You know, the inner transformation takes place. Your persona takes place.
I think for most of us that happens most easily when we tend to when the barrier between ourselves and the rest of the universe gets a little permeable or starts to deconstruct.
Well, we see it all as temporary and a fabrication.
And we're in the middle of it.
We created it.
Yeah, it's our projection.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're the architects of our lives, and then we become the engineers of our life. We're constantly fiddling with our architectural creation.
So when we turn the projector off, we get a chance to sit with who's really watching. You know, the real witness of our existence.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is appropriate place to stop. Next week, we're going to talk about Maha Yoga. And well, actually, next week, we're not going to meet because it's July 4th, that Monday. So we'll have to skip a week and come back the following week after that. We've got some new people with us, and I think it's really great. And I want to start a new cycle of really going back to the basics of Buddha, you know, definitions, getting our vocabulary together, and understanding, you know, some basic things, because we shouldn't take for granted that we know things at that level before we start getting into some of these higher things. So the highest teaching that we've ever done in Buddhism 101. Yes, Michael?
Tonight is probably as close to learning via tidal wave as I've ever experienced with you. So yeah, it's good that you're gonna take a step back and apply some structure. Yeah.
So the question is this: should we go right into, when we finish this? I want to finish this exploration into the Tantra Yoga, but when we finish this at the end of July, should we go right into the new session of 101, where we're going to talk about fundamentals, or should we take a summer break of August break and come back in September? I'd like to hear what Hatley has to say about it. Tommy, what you have to say about it. Brendan, what you think about it. What do you guys think?
I personally would like to start right away.
Okay.
Lance, I know you have a meditation practice class that I saw I think if I could start attending that and having more meditation practice, I would feel comfortable moving forward. A lot of the terminology and stuff I'm getting from my reading that I'm doing. Having said that, you're our teacher, and if you think that it's important for us to really have a strong fundamental base, I would go along with that.
Okay, good. Brendan, what do you think?
Lance, I plan to be available in August, except for perhaps one Monday, and you are our yogi, and we're lucky to have you. And I will go wherever you want to take us.
All right, very good. But we record everything, so even if any of us do miss a Monday, we can catch it, on YouTube afterwards. All the other people here have all been through 101 at least once, many 2 or 3 or 4 times or more. So, and that's the point. And to your point, Tommy, about saying, well, you've read things and everything. We go through these fundamentals regularly. We'll go through this 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, every year, because these fundamentals are so important, and that we may think that we understand things, but at a certain level we may, but there might be something that we just missed. And these things are so important that they get repeated all the time. So we don't have the idea that we don't need those kinds of teachings.
Can I ask what your meditation practice is?
Well, it's the Saturday afternoon. The Saturday afternoon.
Just making sure I wasn't missing anything.
No, that's the Saturday afternoons that we're doing twice a month.
Okay.
So yeah. And Tommy, I know, you have work obligations, so that maybe has been a problem, but the meditation is tied to practice. It's not that we're just coming in and sitting down on a cushion and expect to go into some sort of state of euphoria. There's a process, and we got to begin with the process and so on. And right now we're working on the Shenrezig practice, but it won't be long. We're going to get into some other things that will be very important. So I hope that you're able to join us for that. And if not, we can record it and you can see it, at your convenience.
Yes, the Saturday afternoon meditation practice is at what time again?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
On the 2nd and 4th Saturdays of the month.
Lance, is that at the temple? Is that live with you?
It's at the temple. Okay. And I would prefer that you come to the temple. We can do it on Zoom, but there's a big difference between doing it on Zoom, especially when it comes to practice, doing it on Zoom and being at the temple with the Sangha, with our brothers and sisters. Would anybody disagree with that? Okay. All right. So I hope Anna, I guess she had to leave. So I hope that she would, choose to be present with us in August as well. So I would prefer to keep going, because I find that when we take a break, people their habits change and something else gets interesting, and that ring through the nose takes hold, and all of a sudden, it takes them another month to find us again, so I'd rather keep going. Okay. So does anybody else have any other thoughts or questions?
Quick question, and I probably could research this also, but what is the wrathful deity that corresponds with Vajrahara?
Vajradhara?
Vajrahara.
Vajradhara.
Vajradhara. Oh, yes.
Vajradhara. That would be Mahatara, Chemchak, Garuka, Haruka. So Vajradhara and Samantabhadra are the same peaceful deity. They are the pure, unborn essence of primordial Buddha nature. And so that essence is expressed in the Haruka class as Mahatara. Mahatara Haruka.
I sort of just want to see a picture of what it looks like at this point. Thank you.
Okay.
What did you say you're reading again? That sounded interesting. Tao something?
Oh, the Tao Te Ching.
Tao Te Ching.
Yeah.
Okay.
TaoTeching.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so unless somebody else has something you want to say or a question, then we'll close it for tonight and do our dedications. So Tom is our umze for this evening. So please, would you do dedication and include the dedication prayer by Lord Deacon Sumgun, please?
So did you want me to do the lineage dedication as well?
Sure, you can do. As a matter of fact, let me see something. 1 second, please. We got a few minutes. So if you don't mind, let me give a little bit of an explanation to these. And so if everybody's got your book, the 101 book, so we go to page 18 and 19. This will be because we got a few minutes, so this we can round out the hour this way. So these dedication prayers. So first is the lineage dedication prayer. So here we're talking Dorje Chang. Dorje Chang is the Tibetan name for Vajradhara, who you were asking about, Vajradhara. If you look at that name, it's Vajra, Dhara. So most people do pronounce it Vajrahara, but that D is part of the Dara. So, so Dorje Chang is his Tibetan name, and he's the primordial Buddha. So we say that essence of that true nature that we all have within us, and that is the embodiment of all the enlightened ones, is Dorje Chang. Is so pure, it's unborn. You know, we're the ones, it's within us, and we're the ones that either exalt that, or we're the ones that twist it up and color it in some fashion that is or block it up in some ways. We defile it in some way. What we're trying to do is to clear it up. So then the next name is Tilopa. Tilopa was a yogi who was a great master, self-realized, who visualized Vajradhara, Chakra Samvara, and he was born a wealthy person who then went into the religious tradition and so on, and finally gave that up just to be a yogi and be on a beach and eating fish entrails for the rest of his life. And he was a great teacher with many students. Then Naropa was his most significant disciple. Naropa was a great leader. He was a gatekeeper at Nalanda University. He was the main abbot. He was the great debater of Nalanda University, who thought he was such a great being and so on. And to make a long story short, he realized that he didn't know what he needed to know. He wasn't the embodiment of what he needed to be the embodiment of. And he was directed to find his true teacher, Tilopa. So he went and found Tilopa and spent many, many, many years with Tilopa, who, through just living with him, without giving him one-on-one teachings, that Naropa was able to purify himself and realize his inner realities, inner truth. So Naropa had many students, and the foremost of those was Marpa. Marpa was, so Tilopa and Naropa were both from India. Then Marpa Marpa Loksawa was Tibetan who went to India to get teachings that he could bring back to Tibet and translate into Tibetan. So he was bringing this literature back with him and so on. And he became very, very important. He had many students and so on. So his name, Marpa Loksawa, means the translator. So he was Marpa the translator. And so Naropa was his teacher, was his guru. And Marpa had a student named Milarepa, who was considered to be the saint of Tibet. And but he was also a murderer. And he learned black magic, and we'll hear his story as we go on. He learned black magic as a teenager and did terrible things, and then realized the mistake that he made and wanted to redeem himself. And so he was looking for his teacher to help him to do that. And he finally found Marpa Loksawa, the translator, who then helped Milarepa to break through his attachment to his black magic and so on. And then Milarepa then became the saint of Tibet, because he demonstrated that no matter what you've done, even killing people, you could still redeem yourself, and you still could purify yourself, and you still could achieve enlightenment in a single lifetime. And that's what Marpa was able to do. So it became a saint for all of us to be able to follow his transformation in that way. Then Milarepa had many students, and the most prominent of those was Dharma Lord Gampopa. Gampopa was a physician, was a doctor of the time, who lost his family, that they passed away, and he found his way into the monastic way of life and so on, found Milarepa. Milarepa appreciated Gampopa's intelligence, and he asked him to compose the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So the book that is our main text was written by Gampopa. So stages of the path. And so he had many students, and one of his prominent student was Pagmadrupa. Pagmadrupa was a great monastic who was a great abbot of a huge monastery, and many, many, many great people came out of his monastery. And he combined the yogic teachings with the monastic teachings in an institution. So that's very important. And so he did that. And then one of his great teachers was Jigdan Sumgun, who is here called Lord Drikumpa, who is the founder of our lineage, the founder of this lineage, the Drikung Kagyu lineage. And so he was an ordinary being who spent many, 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 many years in hermitage, in retreat, before he became a monastic. And he went through many changes and so on as a yogi and so on. And then he was able to found our lineage, the Drikung Kagyu lineage, which at one time was the most vibrant and most popular through southern Tibet all the way into eastern Tibet. So, and it is one of the oldest unbroken lineages. He lived 800 years ago. So when we say these prayers, we're saying it to them. We are honoring them. We're saying homage to them. So it's important to do that. When you come to the center, we can introduce you to the portraits and so on, and you can see that. But I wanted you to get familiar with who these beings are and why we say these things that we do. So let's say this prayer together. Dorje Chang, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dorma Lord Gampopa, Pagmadrupa, and Lordri Kompa, please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue, may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Now, this next prayer, there's 4 lines, is the bodhicitta prayer. Bodhicitta is the holy enlightened mind that all the enlightened ones have within themselves, in their heart center. We have it, and what we're trying to do is to remove any blockages to allow that to radiate to all beings. So we say this prayer. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. So we're always mindful of bodhicitta and always trying to make it stronger within ourselves and around us for other beings. And the next prayer is for our gurus. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. And then we say, as Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all merit for all sentient beings. We'll talk about them next time. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the 3 kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. So we'll say that, we'll talk about that. Then the last prayer is on page 20, the Dekarma prayer. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Sri Kompa Ratna Shri, that's Lord Jigdan Sumgun, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much for paying attention, asking questions, making comments.
Thank you.
Okay, so we won't meet next week. We'll meet in 2 weeks. I'll remember to send out a message.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Lance.
Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you.
you,
Zara,
Lance.
good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night, friends.
Night, everyone.
All right.